Everyone, good morning and welcome back to Free Friday Tidbits. So, I wanted to round out this month's focus on abstract concepts by talking with you this morning about predicting outcomes. Right? Why is that a big deal? Well, predicting outcomes is an essential brain task in a whole lot of things, including creating a schedule. Um, having planning for time, right? Last week we talked about time and why that's such a challenge. But how can you plan for time if you can't predict how long things are going to take? How can you make decisions if you cannot complete the equation if X, then Y, right? If this, then that. So being able to predict what's coming next really is a big deal. And we take it for granted in life. But there are many people who are really, really challenged. Part of that is because, if you're a concrete thinker, everything is black and white. It is what it is. Cause and effect does not necessarily enter into it for everybody. And that's a big source of frustration. If we are assuming that people can predict outcomes of something, if people can be able to come up with what comes next in the story, right? Have you ever read a storybook to someone, a well-known story, and purposely mess up to see, what your child's going to do? And oftentimes they will squeal with delight and say, "That's not what happens," right? What we hope from all those years of reading stories to our kids is that they will learn how to predict outcomes for things that they want to do. But for some of us, that remains a lifelong challenge. So predicting outcomes is huge. If I'm driving down the road and I want to pass somebody, if I have trouble predicting how fast someone in the opposing lane is coming at me, how am I going to make a safe determination about whether or not passing someone is a good idea? You can see where that would be a problem. If I was compromised in that area, then you wouldn't want to be my passenger, right? But in all seriousness, you can see where this does get very, very complicated very quickly, why it can be not only frustrating, but also downright scary. So keep in mind that it is something that neurotypical people take for granted, right? Most of the world takes for granted our ability to figure out what's going to happen next and factor that into our decision-making process. Not being able to do that is something that contributes to many people's struggles with being able to make decisions in the first place. Hemming and hawing and not being able to decide or to choose could very well stem from this inability to make predictions. The other thing I wanted to talk about this morning was, hello, have you noticed I have a podcast out there in the podcast world now for FASD? It's called Living with FASD, and it joins, I'm so proud and honored to be part of the FASD podcast family. And there are so many really good ones, and I have become really good friends with a couple of well-known podcast hosts, right? And they do a great job keeping their focus on parenting. And parenting kids with FASD is a humongous responsibility and task. And everyone that is able to do that, kudos to you. Be honored for the hard work that you're doing, right? I see you. Having spent 25 years working in foster care, I know your struggle. I see you. And I thank you. I thank you for every day that you wake up and say, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to start again. And this time I'm going to support my child in a way that they haven't known before. And it's going to be a good day, right? Thank you for that. but there's not a lot out there in the world for those of us who are living with FASD and helping us to figure out better workarounds or better accommodations for the struggles that continue, right? What few services there are out there for children with FASD disappear once you become an adult. And just as the problems go unaddressed because none of the professionals that parents have turned to know what to do because they don't understand FASD, the resources are even more scarce for those of us who are trying to live in the adult world, right? And that's a frequent thing that I hear from parents is, well, Johnny has to be ready to function in the real world. Well, it's all the real world. And people are going, Johnny's going to function the way Johnny's going to function. He will do better if there are supports in place. And if there's not, or if no one has ever helped him figure out that prenatal exposure to alcohol is a part of his story, then he's going to need supports from a podcast like Living with FASD. So I will, like my colleagues in the parenting FASD space, I will be bringing different guests in to talk, many of whom have been on the parenting FASD kind of podcasts also. But we're going to emphasize how that affects adults living with FASD. And my message to anyone who tunes in over in the Living with FASD space is, I see you because I'm living it too. So it's on my podcast home is Spotify, but I'm also on Stitcher. I'm on Audible. I'm on Pocket Cast. I'm supposed to be on Google Podcasts, but I think I may have missed a step because I too am impacted. So I'm going to fix that. But there are 3 episodes up already. And where is my voice? Excuse me. There's 3 episodes up already, and a 4th one will drop every Monday morning, or a new one will drop every Monday morning. Friday mornings for YouTube Free Friday Tidbits, Monday mornings for Living with FASD in the podcast world. Eventually, Living with FASD will be a video podcast as well, but I am pacing out my learning curve challenges because right now I've got too much going on to tackle that one. And that's an accommodation, right? Knowing your limits, knowing if you need to pace yourself, and not going flat out if you don't have gas in the tank, right? So tune in, keep coming back here for Free Friday Tidbits because I'm still going to keep showing up, but start tuning into the podcast on Mondays. So Free Friday Tidbits on this YouTube channel and Living with FASD podcast. All right. Have a wonderful weekend and have a great week. See you next Friday for another Free Friday Tidbit when in July, we start talking about executive functioning challenges. All right. Catch you next time.